Ms. Atkins? Mr. Hendricks?
Here.
Mr. Houston?
Here.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Stoffer?
Here.
Mr. Wyledge? Mrs. Sheffel?
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the June 7th, 2021 agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel?
Yes. Commendation and good news.
I'll defer to Dave.
I do have just 2 items on the agenda. I didn't take time to put things like graduation, girls soccer, you know, all the normal things that are hitting the paper. But there is on the docket that I shared with you, there's a video of the Parade of Excellence that occurred inside the buildings, and it's just remarkable. And then there's also, we have a number of students that are involved in the Young Artists Exhibition in the Old Market again. And so there's a slideshow there that includes some of the work of our kids as well. So that's all I have to share.
Yeah, and our, wish the best of luck to our girls soccer. They play tomorrow at 1 o'clock for the quarterfinals. And when you look at the teams that are left, it's anybody's game. I mean, they are all the teams and some of the competitors, they've had similar outcomes. So, which makes it nerve-wracking, but also makes it kind of exciting. So, I think it's always you get to that level, it's a tough road, but they've got as good of a shot as anyone. So, congrats to them. And I think I'd probably be remiss not to just make a comment in general about kudos to everyone from this board to all of my colleagues and the students, and when I say colleagues, I mean everybody from our bus drivers to our teachers. Tomorrow's the last day of school. We made it.
Yes.
We've made well. let me knock on
So far,
some wood
yeah.
here. But all indications are that we're going to complete the year successfully. It has not been easy. I would be absolutely untruthful if I were to sit here and say to you all and whoever's with us online that this has been a breeze. It has been probably one of the most difficult years I've seen education have to navigate in my 33 years. So it's been tough, but it makes it all that much more rewarding that here we are, and we made it as one of the very, very few school districts that have stayed in session, with no alterations to that in session. We never went hybrid. We made it through, and we had some trying times. I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute in my report. But just, commending, since this is the topic at this point in the board meeting, commending everyone who's had a part in it. And we cannot forget, every single employee group has just been outstanding. Bus drivers, transportation, our facilities folks, the ones behind the scenes sanitizing those classrooms with the electrostatic sprayers every night. Same thing with the buses twice a day. It's just not in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. And I think I had shared before, I've shared it a number of times, I don't know if I've shared it with the board, but I sit on an advisory board for emergency management in Pot County, and they seriously think when all said and done, the research looks back that those efforts with electrostatic sprayers are going to prove to have been more beneficial at fighting, like we were just talking about earlier, just the regular sicknesses. They may even be proven to be equally as effective and maybe even more so than the masks. So as somebody said, and again, I'm stealing some of my own thunder, but we've got the equipment. We're going to continue doing that. It's going to be a practice. But just commend anyone and everyone, and we can't leave out the students too, because it took them in the equation to make it a successful year. So just kudos to everyone as we wrap up tomorrow.
Absolutely. Anyone else, comments and suggestions? Or commendation and good news, I guess? Yeah. We will go on to comments and suggestions from the audience. This is a portion of our agenda, the first time that anyone can address the board that's in our audience, or if there's any comments online. No comments online? Okay. We'll go on to consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Is there an updated personnel sheet?
There is. There are a number of changes to the personnel sheet, and I'll also share the teacher leadership and compensation program hires as well, which is a separate document than what you see here. So the asterisk ones are the ones that are added to the consent agenda after the publication. And then this sheet is the teacher leadership selections for this year, for this coming year rather. There are 81 teacher leadership positions filled by 52 teachers.
Does anyone have any comments or discussion on this? Okay, vote please.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. Report 6.01, COVID and other ongoing return to learn plan.
Yeah, so a little bit of an explanation. You know, I think I had said at the last meeting, I want to kind of qualify this, if you will. I did not put a COVID report update as I have been doing all year, because I really felt that I report to the board on that every week in my weekly update, and I really felt that it was becoming insignificant because the numbers were diving, and I still feel that. The reason I did put one back in this time was for a couple of reasons. If you noticed, I said COVID and our ongoing return to learn plan. So I need to just give a little bit of an update on what the state's expecting with return to learn. And I thought, well, if I'm going to talk to COVID-related things with what the state has rolled out, it makes sense to, you know, to have kind of a year-end wrap-up of the COVID numbers. So I'm going to do that first. Dave, if you can pull up, I kind of want to share with the board and anyone watching what this is for a good part of the year how I've been tracking. And just to kind of give you the lay of the land here, that's when things started to get really worrisome in November. Now, I have all this in my chicken scratch in my notebooks from prior to then, but when things started getting serious, I started putting it into a spreadsheet. But you can see at the top, this is just pretty easy to understand. The date, the high school students, high school staff, middle school, Titan Hill, Creft. The other is staff that may not fit into a specific building. You know, they may be in, you know, it could be one of us at the district level. It could be somebody that's in multiple buildings. The red is the total number of positives in the district on that date. The Pot County percentage, I started keeping track of that daily. I was for a while only looking at it when there was a concern because there was a jump. And then the AB2, that's the category that Dave set up for us in our attendance tracker, students that were quarantined. So if you just look at this real quick, that's right off the bat back in November, and the yellow dates were the dates that we all probably didn't sleep a night of because we were close to maybe having to cave in. You can see not only was it the fact that, you know, if you look at it, the 20th of November when we were racing toward Thanksgiving, at 44 people in our district positive for COVID. Now that's a huge number if you think of the size of our district and how infectious COVID was, but that maintained as the rest of the year the highest number we would have. The Pot County positivity rate at that same day, 22.5%. And to give perspective now, that is, once again, over a 14-day period, of all the tests that they test, that's the percentage of people that they test who become positive. And that gets a little tricky as we get on into the school year, because the number can sometimes be up, but the number of people actually testing can be very, very low. So it can be a little deceiving. There it was not deceiving. There it clearly was 22.5%. And again, to give some perspective, and we always chose to follow Pot County Public Health. I want to make that statement because we stayed firm with that all the time. But just to show the variance of things, at that time, that's when the CDC was still saying that if schools had were in areas over 5%, they should think seriously about being in session with over 5% positivity rates, and we were running at 22.5 in Pot County. So we made it to Thanksgiving, and you can kind of, I'll just have Dave kind of scroll. If you see, we get to Christmas break, winter break, and we took a nice dive. We stayed a little low in coming into January. I remember that date in January where we had 12 there on the 4th. I was really hoping for a 0 that day, and I was really disappointed that we had 12. But at the same time, you can kind of see not only the Pot County rate trending, but also our AB2 students, the number of students we had in quarantine, way down from the 200. And if you just kind of, I don't want to touch on all these dates, but you can just see a trend going down, and sometimes it would jump back up. If you scroll on a little bit, Dave, we actually get to a spot, if you look at our overall numbers, see, we got down to like 2 and 3 there around March 24th, which was right after spring break. That's when we started getting comfortable. Then you can remember there were concerns about the variant surges, and you can see the numbers kind of got back up, and in April we were back in double digits, which made us worry. And fortunately, it again started trending down, and here we are on the 7th of June. And the only thing that you may notice there that has been, I'll call it a minor disappointment, but again, you have to keep perspective. If you look at the positivity rates in the county, we got down on the 2nd of June to 1.7%. Now, when we were at 1.7%, we literally in all of Pot County had like 2 people that were positive. And there was actually a day for a short time when there was 1 person positive in all of Pot County. Now, there was also very few people testing, and some of that has to do with the season change, I think, and what have you. I was still hopeful. I think I put in the weekly update. I actually counted all the counties in southwest Iowa, and at the end of last week could find, it was just in the low double digits of total positive cases recorded in all of southwest Iowa. Today, it has, Pot County is back up to 16. I don't think that suggests a trend necessarily. It just suggests that more people have tested, and so it's back up a little bit. But when you look all over Iowa, and I do that often, things are really settled down. You have to look at a Polk County to see that there's maybe 50 people positive, but their 50 people can be a lower positivity rate because of the number testing than what our 16 may be. So it's as we got further along, and Dave's pulling up that Iowa site right now, which is I don't want to say that it's well done. I don't want to say that it's fun to fiddle with, but see, if you look right now, it shows Pot County, we've got 4%. Dave, just put the cursor over, don't click on it, but put it over, and see, it tells us not only the 4%, but the total positive, that's in the last 7 days there, 16 at 4%. But go over to Polk, Dave, and you'll see only 2%, but they have 82 positives. So that's a little bit of the perspective game that you have to play with that. And I think Polk, which expectedly I saw Dubuque was up there quite a bit when I looked. Oh, no, it wasn't Dubuque. They're actually down quite a bit now. Somebody else on that side was up a little bit, but nothing quite like Polk. So things are looking good, and I just wanted to go in that detail a little bit before I talk about the requirements from the state with Return to Learn, because I thought it was just a year-ending report to kind of show where those numbers are coming from that I report to the board and usually report to the public at a board meeting over the course of the year. And we'll continue to, I'll continue to track that. We won't be tracking student attendance, for a while, but it'll be nice to maybe start off next year and see those numbers flat and stay that way, is what we're gonna hope. So I'll just segue really quick into just a little bit that I want the board to be aware of with what the state is now requiring going forward with Return to Learn plans. And again, to give a little perspective, much of this is coming from the federal government through the state, and it's relative to the ESSER money, the American Recovery, American Recovery Plan? Yes. But we still call it ESSER 3 because it's the third wave of stimulus money. And some of their requirements to states governing this money and these reimbursements have came out after the money became available. So the states, backing up and saying, hey, you need to do this. So we've got to do some things for our ESSER reimbursement, our American Recovery Plan reimbursement, and we'll be working with that. Andrea and I will be working through that with our team. And in July, the Department of Education is going to open up a report that we have to complete and then publish on our webpage. So I'll be asking for Josh's help, just like we did for our Return to Learn plan, and it will go tandem with our Return to Learn plan. And what they've added to that requirement is that while most people would maybe think our Return to Learn plan was no longer needed, well, you have to realize the federal government is talking about the whole country, and there are some schools that were out this whole time. So they're requiring Return to Learn plans for states and for local education agencies to be eligible for ESSER reimbursements. So we have to keep our Return to Learn plan alive. At our admin team last week meeting, we had a Thursday meeting for our full admin team. We asked them to start reviewing protocols in their buildings to determine, what types of things are going to stay. Obviously, the governor has made any kind of a mask mandate illegal, so we'll have to pull that off of there. We'll still clearly let people know that they will be optional for usage in our schools and on our property. I mentioned the electrostatic sprayers. We're going to keep that as a protocol. I think maybe even well beyond. Maybe it's just a new protocol. We have that equipment. And so those are the kinds of things we're adjusting. But we have to keep that published, and we have to review it every 6 months. So that's something that I will bring to the board for review. And we're still trying to sort through the guidance from the DE, but we may have to kind of put it on an agenda as a hearing to allow for public comment and such like that. But I'll sort through those details. But so I just wanted to publicly let everyone know that as we're thinking everything is settled down, we will continue to talk about Return to Learn plans because it's being required of us to do that. And we will continue to publish that. And then after July, when we see what's required, we'll start publishing our plan for spending the ESSER II dollars, which you all know, full disclosure to our public here watching, we've already allocated, we've hired positions with those dollars that we'll be, submitting for reimbursement. And the DE is settled us down on that somewhat. And they said, well, if you've taken them public, which we haven't had hearings and whatnot, but we're okay. But as we learn more over the summer, we'll probably add a few more steps into how we get full buy-in, maybe you might say, and approval from the board for getting reimbursements through the ESSER money. So that's what we're going to see, and I just thought it was appropriate to publicly let the board know that. I know I've said some of that in the weekly updates as well. And again, the night before the last day of school, I thought, well, I'll show you the spreadsheet that kind of tracked the numbers all year. And we'll leave it at that and hope that it really is getting in our rearview mirror, and it'll just be maintenance on these plans going forward. So if there's any questions or comments, I'd be more than glad to entertain them.
I don't hear any, so I thank you very much, and we will just keep moving forward with that. We'll go on to discussion items, 7.01, District Developed Service Delivery Plan, DDSDP.
You said that very well. You said that better than most of the times I say it.
I said it slowly.
But Lori has helped me get more and more fluent in my pronunciation of the DDSDP. But you may recall on May the 3rd at our board meeting, we brought this plan forward. Lori was here to answer any questions at that time. The real intent was to allow for some public comment. We had advertised it, hearing-like, if you will, similar to what we were just discussing. We had advertised it in the paper. We allowed for comment to be sent through either Lori or even through Andrea if it were to come in because of the advertisement we put in place. We also let the public know that we would be allowing for public comments at that May 3rd meeting. We did that. We did not really have any plans, but this is something that we're required to do. We're required to develop this for special education students, pre-K through 12th grade. It has to be available for public comment as we made it available. The requirements for the DDSDP are met through a set of 5 questions and a series of assurances. And the questions address multiple areas, including the process used to develop the plan, how services will be organized for eligible individuals, how special education teachers' caseloads will be determined and monitored, what procedures will be used to resolve caseload concerns, and what process will be used to evaluate the effectiveness of the plan. We're required to reinvent that plan, if you will, revisit it and reinvent it every 5 years. Lori has effectively walked us through that. We've done all the things appropriate, and what I shared with you on May 3rd with Lori present was that once we had the hearing, it would then go to the local AEA for their approval, the board, the AEA approval, and it did receive AEA approval. So now the last step in the process is to bring it back to the Board of Education to get your final adoption, if you will. Your approval will adopt the plan and put it in place, and then we will be not done with it. We will be at the point of putting it into motion, but we will be done with the approvals for another 5 years, if you will. So I know you've had that information in front of you for a while, going back to May 3rd. I'm not sure if the board has any clarifying questions about the areas that the plan has to address, the 5 questions, or any of the things that we do. Lori, as our resident expert, does phenomenal work for us in the area of special education, and she can answer any questions that anybody may have.
So was there a lot of change from, you review this every 5 years, so was there a lot of change in the last 5 years?
Not significant. There was some change in the delivery of services, some semantic wording changes, but a full continuum of services for kids with disabilities, all the way from students that spend all of their time in the general education classroom to students that require supports that extend outside of the district. The other one that it seems like we continually tweak as a system is the system that we use for monitoring caseloads of special education teachers. And just looking at a fair and equitable way to do that based on the different areas that special education teachers deal with in terms of instruction and caseload monitoring. But I would say minor changes, great discussion as a group, but some minor things.
Okay.
Lori, how many students does this population cover?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think what we certified. I'd have to look back, but roughly 360, 370 on our October count. We certify our special education numbers on October 30th. And I could look and get you that exact number.
It's about 14% of our students.
It's steadily increased a little bit over the years. We stayed steady around 11% for many, many years, but we've seen a slow increase in our overall percentage.
Did COVID play a part in any of this with remote learning? Anything like that? I mean, is that now part of this plan?
Not necessarily in the development of the plan.
Is it technically, I mean, homebound education was still very much a part of special education.
Yeah, COVID has, because of our opportunities to provide remote learning for a lot of kids, for some of our students that have required a homebound IEP for a variety of reasons, we've had better opportunities to provide those services to kids because we've had that remote platform available to them. So for students that used to get very limited homebound services, they've been able to engage much more frequently with their peers in their classrooms remotely.
Good.
Yeah.
Is there any other comments, questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lori.
All right, 7.02 asphalt repairs.
Yes, this is pretty straightforward. Randy could not be with us tonight. He was going to try to jump online if there were any additional questions that I couldn't answer, but I don't expect this to be a tricky one. If you've spent any time on our high school parking lot, you know that it's dangerous for rims and tires, but it's in dire need of some repair, and some of the areas are in need of actual replacement. We're not talking about a full parking lot replacement, though. We're talking about in some areas removing the old asphalt and installing new asphalt at 6 inches. And we've had 3 different contractors look at this. 3 different contractors. Yes, Dave, thank you. Dave's putting up. We have, I think Randy gave us more pictures than we could sit here all evening and look at the pictures. But there's just some really, really bad. Now, just to be clear too, there are some things that will be addressed as part of the construction package, upon closure. But this is in addition to anything that is, being caused by the construction, and this won't be impacted by the continued construction. So, 3 companies were asked to come in and bid: Century Asphalt, American Paving, and Bennington Paving. Those numbers and more details are provided in your board packets, kind of breaking all that down. But Century Asphalt came in with a low bid. They were followed up with and discussed their plan to make sure there wasn't something that they were not covering that the others were, and we feel good about their proposal. And so that's our recommendation, is to go with Century Asphalt for the $64,601 bid for the asphalt repairs.
So these are areas where the trucks going back for construction don't or haven't been on?
Here's what I should clarify that. It's not to suggest that there couldn't be some further damage even to what we repair, but what we need to understand is, as part of the construction contract, anything that is damaged will be fixed at the end. So, you know, we're going to get to a time here soon, if you're paying attention to the auditorium and how fast the shell is going up, and now we can see that the fly loft is coming together. You know, there's not going to be additional fill brought in, so there's going to be a time in the near future where the real heavy stuff
Right.
will
Right.
subside. The timing should be good, but the bottom line, anything, whether it's new or old, that is damaged due to the construction will wrap up with repair
Right.
when we complete.
Okay. Is there any discussion, any questions?
On the back drive, I know we've got speed bumps. Is there a necessity really for those?
Yes. Yes, and thanks for asking that, Bob, because that question was asked. You know, I don't know if Joel's online. He's most definitely welcome to drop a comment in to Josh if he is. But Joel and I have talked about that. Even with the speed bumps, and I've been witness to this at sporting events, kids, I hate to say it's not always kids. I mean,
Right.
sometimes adults are careless too, but you'll hear trucks going back there and still bottoming out because they're not paying attention to them. But I think for the most part, they do cause people to be very slow. They want their autos damaged, and I think without them, we would have, especially with our younger population, some dangerous speeds going back there around the stadium. And again, the construction company, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't the construction company. It was these folks, when they were given bids, they posed it up to Randy if we were still in need of speed bumps anywhere. And I talked to Joel at the time, and he caused me to recall many things I had observed, but the high school administration is adamant that we still need them. Dean Sharp feels pretty adamant that we need them in place because of what we see. And keep in mind too, unfortunately, whether we care for this or not, and you can look at it sometimes in a good way and a lot of times in not such a good way, but our parking lots, even when we have no activities going on, tend to be a local meeting place and a hangout for our youth. And sometimes we're using cameras to help local police, you know, figure out if kids, what they were doing on the parking lot, and sometimes that involves some driving and sometimes even some accidents. And we just feel that you know, that kind of inconspicuous road connecting the two campuses from the back, without those speed bumps, I just think there would be a lot of cars flying back.
Yeah, I just didn't know if a gate or something would be more appropriate than speed bumps. Then it would stop all of that.
Yeah, the only challenge to that is I know that until the auditorium's done, there's a lot of stuff that's transported between the schools that go back there.
Not
having
supposed
done
to
it.
be by the contractor.
No.
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 I'm talking about like band
What
equipment.
we're doing.
Oh,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
for us.
And
I
then
mean,
you'd
that-
have to open it during certain time, close it during the certain time, and then the ones that would just go around it.
Yeah, having
I think
almost
the-
been hit at a football game, just trying to come across there, yeah, I would say I'd want to keep the speed bumps.
The games are the biggest worry for me, not
Yeah.
that, you know, we do, and of course with the construction, we have high school kids parking in the middle school parking lot this year. Well, that won't be forever, but, and technically they're supposed to park over here, and most of them go in the middle school entrance and then they walk around, but some do come around. And some of our worst driving examples from, you know, in the whole community are at the worst times when we're having drop off and pickup, you know, in our schools. And I just think that's a spot. And then again, what I've witnessed even at games, if, you know, I usually stand on the track when I'm at games, whether it's football or soccer, and it's a common thing for kids to be driving around, you know, and you know, it's worrisome. So I think it is needed. It's a great question, Bob, and I assure you that it's something that we did discuss, but it's still the preferred method to deter careless driving in those spots.
The speed bump where the two roads converge, where the circle comes and the parking lot comes, that one is key, because when you come out of that student parking lot, it's almost like a blind corner if you're turning left from the circle.
Right.
I like a speed bump there in case someone's going 45 and someone doesn't see someone, they turn, and by that time, that speed bump's been worn down, because I picked up Ainsley today and there were no brakes applied, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Randy just bypassed Josh and sent me a message directly. I'll have to talk to him about protocol. Just kidding. That's fine. But he made a very good point to remind us that the construction project has a $200,000 allowance for the construction road, and he's also concurring, because he and I talked about it with the high school, that the speed bumps were determined that they were still needed. But yeah, $200,000 allowance for the construction within the construction budget, already there, not added, already there.
Is there any other questions, comments about the asphalt repairs? Okay. 7.03, 2021 to 2022 Board of Education meeting dates.
Now, I had shared these with the board, and I gave you a little bit of a heads up. I think that obviously well before my time and going back, it's always just been practice for consistency that Anna usually just re-ups the meetings, and it's first and third Monday of the month, which I think works most of the time. You know, in my 2 years here, we've had to change a few because they've fallen, you know, but it's usually been that one, maybe two. This one going in, we knew we had 3 dates that would be a bit of a problem. And the first one would be that we landed on Labor Day, which we probably wouldn't want to have a board meeting on Labor Day. I'd be willing if you would be, but I assume most people are still barbecuing that day. The first day after our winter holidays, which we've dealt with that before and adjusted it in my time here. And then it turned out to be Monday on spring break. And I know some of our board members took advantage of spring break last year for vacation time. And many of us do as well. So what you have in the dates that were provided for you already adjust for those. And they work just fine. They allow us to maintain for the most part, the same number of meetings. The only caveat there, or not even a caveat, just the difference is in March, we talked collectively as a cabinet, and I, of course, rely heavily on Andrea, because a lot of times it's the business that needs to be done. Even if we can wait for an agenda item, it's still what's in consent. But we thought it was okay to go down to one meeting in March, because we really couldn't add a meeting before and a meeting after without getting somewhere where we're going to have 2 Mondays in a row with a meeting, and that didn't seem real productive. And you know, our standby, if you will, is if we had some business that really needed to be approved, you know, we could even have a quick consent agenda meeting if need be. We're going to try to avoid that, and I think we'll be able to avoid that. I don't think we'll have any problems with it, but that's just a side note. Other than that, we did shift in some places where it's not necessarily the first and third, but these all work. So those are the only differences, and hopefully this wouldn't cause us to come talk about any one individual meeting that we would need to alter along the way. I think this will take care of them in advance.
And then in August, we would have the 3 meetings, since we would not have
Right.
the meeting for
Right,
on
yes, I'm
Labor
sorry
Day.
I didn't mention that one, but yeah, because we have so many Mondays in August that,
Right.
you know,
Otherwise, we're going so long
Right.
between the last meeting or the second meeting in August to the meeting in September, so.
And they're still at 2-week intervals in August, so that's okay. But you're right, we don't have the Labor Day meeting, so it's a little longer. But we should be good there. That's why we put the 30th in there,
Right.
because we thought, yeah, with school starting up, going from August the 16th all the way to September 20th is a stretch.
Right. Does anyone have any comments, any concerns about projecting or having the meetings at these times? Okay. 7.04, software licensing renewals.
And now I get to be quiet for a little bit and pass the ball over to Dave to cover the next two pieces.
We're asking you to renew 3 software platforms for us in tonight's meeting. We use PowerSchool for 3 different products. Our student information management system, our registration enrollment system, and our HR records systems. And they total $51,215.30. Those are based upon, for the most part, they're based upon student count. And we actually lowered the licensing asking number of students as a correction. We were certifying at 3,250 students, which was close to what our maximum was several years ago. And we never adjusted it downward. So this year we took advantage of moving that licensing fee down a bit. So prices go up, but our enrollment numbers were down a little bit, so balancing that out a little. The second is a 3-year agreement for the iReady Diagnostic Assessments and Instruction Platform. This is used in grades K through 8. We're going to be using instruction in grades K through 6 in math. The 6th grade is 100 licenses specific to intervention students at the middle school, and K8 is all students. So all students at Kraft, all students at Titan Hill will have the instruction component, and all students K8 will have the diagnostic assessment components in reading and math. We also use the iReady platform as our approved designated screening tool for reading through the Early Childhood Implementation Law. It's a 3-year agreement for $149,884.45. And the last renewal is the formative assessment and data management product that we use. It's from Illuminate Ed, and it's called Illuminate DNA. And it includes item banks of questions and all of the data warehousing tools that we use for managing and analyzing all of the data in the district. So.
I will make a real quick, just to make sure you know, I don't know, I'm looking at you, Bob, because you often tend to, when it gets to action time, but we did write those as 3 separate motions for each one of those, because Dave specifically spelled out what each one does.
Is there any discussion about the licensing renewals? So do all of these go per our enrollment numbers?
Yeah, all except for the, which is interesting, the registration enrollment component from PowerSchool is actually a single license. So it's based upon bands of enrollment, and so we're bigger than the smallest but smaller than the big ones. You know, we're in a band there. So if we increased by 300 kids, it wouldn't cost us any more.
Okay.
If we decreased by 300, it won't cost us any less. That's the only one. All of the rest of them are based upon, well, the HR component is based upon student enrollment, regardless of how many employees we have, for example. The student information management system is based upon a number of students. There also is a 5% cushion that the vendors will allow us. So if we exceed it for less than 5%, they won't charge us extra during the enrollment period, or during the subscription period. And most of those details are listed in the actual software quotes that you see.
Is there any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll go to 7.05, band instrument renewal cycle.
Before I have Dave take this one as well, I do want to point out, because I've had so many questions lately and I talked to multiple news media stations, this has nothing to do with our stolen trailer. This is, as it says, and Dave will explain, it's the band instruments cycle. So this
Right.
was coming no matter what. This would have happened tonight, whether that trailer were to show up with everything in it or not. So if folks listening don't know what I'm talking about, well, that's okay. You'll find out soon enough. But
Right.
for those who do, I just wanted to make it really clear that this does not, especially if members of the media would possibly be listening, because they're paying attention for new details and on what happened with that situation, and they've talked to me today about it. So if they would be on, I didn't want them to think that we're proposing a bunch of purchases here already because of what has gone missing in the trailer. So I apologize, Dave, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
No,
for
I
you.
was going to start out with that very statement, that this work was done long before graduation occurred, right? The planning from the instrumental music teachers was done, the bids were gotten. You see that in the quotes that are attached in the document. Just to give you a little history, we have for the last number of years spent between $20,000 and $25,000 a year annually, mostly out of physical plant and equipment levy money, to attend to the large, expensive kinds of instrumentation that is required to support a successful band program. And what this represents is slightly more than that for this 1 year, and some concessions on the annual part to try to make that happen. So there are really two pieces here. The first piece is the $18,607,000 number. That number last year, like I said, was $33,000. But I encourage them to look carefully at that because of the marching band percussion question. And to renew the marching band percussion alone is over $25,000, well, it's $24,900. And that's by using reconditioned, slightly used but reconditioned instruments to do that. And they did that. The band directors did what I asked them to do. They looked at the whole program and said, so what do we really need right now? How can we do this and do both pieces of this and not break the bank? Andrea and I also talked about this, that the marching percussion is not, it's not something that you can should piecemeal. It's something that should be done as a set. And so it's a periodic thing. It's once every 10, 12 years to do that kind of thing. So Bandrick just did a nice job, I think, of planning and thinking in the long term about where they can be and should be. The instruments are all listed on the bid proposal that you saw. You also, as part of this, see, I guess it's not here, but what I sent to Anna was a historical look at all of this too. So every year that we've done this annual cycle has another tab on that spreadsheet, and it's all there, very transparent for you to see. So, and with that, it's just an approval of two different purchases, one from Marching Exchange for the marching percussion, battery, and mallet instruments, and those are reconditioned instruments. and then one for $18,607 for the items that were listed on the other sheet, which include a couple of tubas, some chimes, a few items for helping to support rehearsal management, et cetera.
Is there any questions, discussion?
Probably a good time to just mention that, good problem to have, but our band numbers are growing, which is exciting to see, coming out of the middle school and retaining at the high school. That's always a really good sign. And it's, it has to stand the test of time,
Right.
because you can have bubbles like that because of maybe relationships built. But we have some good vertical pieces going on with our band directing, which helps that. And so it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, and success breeds success too.
Yeah.
They've had a couple of very good years, and kids are excited, and the attrition is very good right now. We were a little disappointed with sixth grade last year in pandemic, but those numbers are bouncing back very, very quickly.
Having a son that's in the band, I would argue that we probably have one of the better, having seen a lot of performances, probably one of the better bands in the metro, if not in the region by far. So it's something that we should be proud of.
I agree.
Well, and since we've started the cycle for renewing, I mean, when we first started this, we had instruments that were how many years old?
Oh, yeah. It was like, I think about it at home. I have a mower, and when I replace my mower, I feel so good about it. I actually feel like mowing again, right?
Right.
But, you can only get so much life out of some of
Right.
these instruments. And some, honestly, get a different kind of use than others. A bassoon is a cherished instrument and is only used for concert band, doesn't go outside, etc. But, a marching tuba that gets bounced around on the bus, or percussion instruments that are heavily used during that marching season, or keyboard instruments that go outside and get rained on. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into this.
Right.
Part of it's driven by the numbers. If you have 6 tuba players and you only got 4 tubas, that's an issue. And part of it's driven by encouraging kids to go to those instruments, so that you can build a band that's balanced, a band that has full instrumentation. And in the future, I see, French horns on the list for renewal. We asked them not to just do this year, but think about next year too, and you see that in the spreadsheet as well. So they're trying to forecast with numbers and with, the shape of the instruments, and they're looking at all the right factors
Right.
while they
Good.
work on it.
Anyone else? Questions? All right, on to policies, 7.06, 502, 503, policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the second read.
Yes, so just a really, really quick recap. I had shared on the first read that this was an example of a set of policies that, especially with some areas, these are all relative to students, and in this case, there's a lot of discipline pieces on here. We took a much more in-depth look at these, including all the principals reviewing them, and also our own attorney reviewing them, because the suggestion was that our policy 502.1, prohibition of serious student misconduct, was in depth, but it covered a whole lot of areas, and in doing so, what IASB said is they really felt that we were leaving some key elements out, and they recommended that we would break those out into these various places that are, you know, that are within a lot of these policies, but definitely the ones most immediately following that top LC deletion. Our legal counsel concurred 100%, thought that there's been enough that has changed, which discipline legislation relative to discipline is constantly moving, and at this point in time, he felt that was good. So I'm just recapping. I know I already shared that with the board, and the only other thing, I did not have any questions come to me between now and then, and there were no changes except, and this is a mistake on my part, I made a note that I was going to do this. So Andrea, if you can just, for the record, so when they vote on this is accurate, but the very bottom policy, keeping policy 502.12, I say to renumber that to 502.6, and then the legal references according to IASB 502.6, that's actually 502.5. I noted that last time and have even a note on my, always bring my former packet with me, and I have a note on there to change it, and I gave it to Anna, and I didn't ever change it. So that's on me, definitely not Anna. But other than that, there are no changes to these from the first read.
And with these, if there's any mention in our handbooks for any of the policy numbers, those are being changed
Yeah.
because the handbooks will be coming
Right.
to us.
That is on the shoulders of our principals. I've been asking them to follow all of our board meetings all year, and to make sure that they pay attention to policies. Just because, I mean, I've given them my word that if something significant changes, which it really hasn't, but that I would bring that to their attention. But for those very reasons, references and other places, we'll probably go through a period where we'll be catching some of those
Correct.
things and having to go back and fix them, because there's, especially when it comes to numbers, those numbers have changed pretty drastically. But for the handbook, I met with the principals a month ago, and before this even came as a first read, and because they were involved already, and I said, you've got to really pay attention to these things as you go about your handbooks, so we are fully aligned. And the only exception may be is, we're still finishing up the 500s. I'll bring you the final chunk of 500s at the next board meeting. So there could be some that just don't fall in line because it's a matter of timing, and we'll come back and pick those up next year. But for the most part, the principals have been asked to stay on top of that and to consider that when they are revamping their handbooks.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Are you okay with these on the second read? All right. 7.07, 503, 504, policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the first read.
Yes, and this one also had at least a small chunk in here. Most of them, like always, have not really changed much. I did involve Lori quite a bit in the policies regarding physical restraint and use of physical restraint. This was a really good exercise for us because we actually had certain forms and such that we had approved is probably too strong of a word, but we had adopted and that we were using, but they were not exhibits for us in our board policies. They were very appropriate. They came with legal recommendations, came through the AEA predominantly. And what we found, we also had some comparable instruments there to compare with IASB, and in some cases ours were more thorough, so we kept them, but we adopted them into being exhibits. So we added those in, which they weren't there before. We were using them. Lori you know, as the resident expert, was very, very familiar with those. She had guided, you know, cohort of people through adopting them as our practice, but they were not officially in policy, which, not that they absolutely have to be. You don't always have to have regulations and exhibits, but with this alignment, it made sense to do that. So the pieces relative to physical restraint and what happens, the debriefing afterwards, you know, the document, class clear stuff, you know, that's been received a lot of press coverage in the last year or so. It's been dealt with on the local and federal, or state and federal level, about class clears and such. So this brings all of that up to date, with legal references, and makes things much more thorough. And again, we had the right things in place. We just did not have them inside of our policy book. So we now do.
Okay.
But those are the only pieces that took some, you know, a little more extensive review, and specifically Lori was the one that I charged with that. And that's a first read, so again, they'll come back again. I just would ask the board to, in your review, if you have any questions, just drop me an email and I'll look into it and provide answers, and/or if we need to have changes for the second read, I'll bring those back with changes on the second read.
Okay. Is everyone all right with these on the first read?
We're making some headway. We're,
Yes.
you know, I think it was Andrea that came to me a little while back and said, when do you think we'll get to the whatever number she said? And I just said, well, maybe July. But I have kind of mapped it out, and I think we could have this complete. Don't hold me to it, but maybe in October, which would be a good feel. We'll have,
Right.
you know, with a fine-tooth comb, went through our entire policy book, and it'll feel good. But we're, you know, it kind of feels like we've crested, and we're, because the student section is huge, you know, and we get
Absolutely.
past that, and we're gonna have some easier series to, you know, to get through. But we've still got a little ways to go, but it's going very well.
Okay. Comments and suggestions. This is the second time during our board meeting that anyone can address the board in the audience or online. If there are any comments.
Well, Mr. Portrait has said thank you to the school board and Dr. Canos for the asphalt project. Probably just trying to make me feel better.
Tell them they haven't voted on it yet.
Yeah,
He should know how to.
yeah, he should, yes. All right. We'll go on to action items. 9.01, district developed service delivery plan.
See?
I know it. District developed service delivery plan, DDSDP. Can I get a motion, please?
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the AEA-approved Lewis Central District Developed Service Delivery Plan as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mrs. McDaniel? Yes. Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield?
Yes. 9.02, asphalt repairs.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a move to approve Century Asphalt for the asphalt repairs as presented totaling $64,601.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel? Yes. Mrs. Sheffield?
Yes. 9.03, 2021-2022 Board of Education meeting dates.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed Lewis Central Board of Directors meeting dates and times for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second. Give it to her.
If we have a second. Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel? Yes. Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield?
Yes. 9.04, software licensing renewals, could I get a motion for the first one?
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the renewal of our Power School licensing for $51,215.30.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. For the second licensing renewal,
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the renewal of our iReady licensing and curriculum from Curriculum Associates for $149,884.45 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to be clear, that one's a three-year
Three-year.
license. Right.
Three-year contract for those dollars.
Any other discussion? Vote, please.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. And for the third and last
Madam
licensing.
Chairwoman, motion to approve the renewal of our Illuminate data and assessment licensing from Illuminate Ed for $21,264.88 that was outlined as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. 9.05 Band Instrument Renewal Cycle.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of the listed marching percussion instruments totaling $24,900 from the Marching Exchange as presented, and to approve the purchase of the listed instruments from vendors Ryman and Schmidt as presented totaling $18,607.
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? When will these be in? Will they be in for fall?
We hope so.
Oh, okay. I just,
I mean, seriously, I didn't ask that question of
Right.
Dan. The reconditioned instruments are quick
okay,
to come. It's the tubas and some of those that are made overseas, they're a little tougher to
Yeah.
forecast.
okay. All right. Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. 9.06, 502, 503, policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the second read.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the policies included in the 502 and 503 series and all accompanying regulations and exhibits on the second reading as discussed.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. 9.07, 503, 504, policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the first read.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve policies included in the 503 and 504 series and all accompanying regulations and exhibits as presented on its first reading.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Vote, please.
Mrs. McDaniel. Yes. Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. Next board meeting will be June 21st, start time 6:30, unless that would change, but otherwise, anything else for future board meetings or items of interest? School is done for students tomorrow?
School's done for students tomorrow. Last day for our teaching staff is Wednesday. And, yes.
Okay. All right, with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, you can stay. Otherwise, thank you for.